I titled my presentation From Buzzwords to a Framework for a Reimagined Education Future. So there are two parts in this presentation. First is, of course, taking stock of the buzzwords. I mean, these concepts, these things that we often hear as to the future of education, not only the Philippines, but worldwide, especially now that we are transitioning into this so-called new era or the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. And some of the things that we usually read when we talk of the future of higher education. So what are these projected futures in higher education? And part two will be making sense of these buzzwords and projected education so that we can somehow have a framework as to what a reimagined education future could be. I mean, from these buzzwords and projected futures. Of course, now we can reflect on what happened. I think you can relate with what I will say, that as it was happening at the time, from March 2020 and the following months, we were not able to really reflect at the time. What we did was to react to the events, and trying to make sense. In fact, if I may say, during the last day of our office, that was March 18, 2020, we still had a meeting, no? The Chancellor's Advisory Committee, and we were preparing for the lockdown, because there was already that announcement of the lockdown. And at the time, the preparations included like how can we digitally transform all our processes at the UPOU. Frankly speaking, I thought it was just a 1 week, 2 weeks, or at most 1 month. So I even left some food. I mean, my snack items at the office, etc., not knowing that when I left that office, it would take about more than a year before I was able to go back. So we were familiar with all these things that happened, the lockdown, the solution, the pole vaulting, I should say, so that we can ensure the continuity of learning and the preparations that we've been doing for the next normal or the post-pandemic era of education. And if we're going to take a look closely at some impacts of the pandemic, which can be the context of a reimagined education future, this was something that was described by the World Economic Forum in December 2021, focusing on Metro Manila. So it says there, as of September 2021 in Metro Manila, there were already 4 lockdowns of varying stringency, totaling 9 months of restrictions on work, school, and other public gatherings. It had widened the disparities in education and employment. Of course, this is in Metro Manila, but we can see that it can mirror what had happened in other areas of the country. The lockdown widening the disparity in education and employment, digitalization of schoolwork favors the privileged. I think this is also something that we observe, because only 55% of students have internet access. Public schools had difficulty adapting to remote learning due to lack of resources and preparedness. We have observed this, and this was something that was also relayed to us by our fellow educators during the time that we were conducting capacity building for our fellow educators, so that we can help them transition to remote learning. And the country reached an unemployment rate of 10.3%. The highest in 15 years. But of course, this is not an isolated case for the Philippines. So when we reimagine an education future, the question that we can ask ourselves is that what can we at the higher education sector do to help alleviate this situation? Okay, so Now, going back to the buzzwords, when we talk of an education future, these are the things that we read, we hear, especially in academic conferences or forums like the one that we are having now. So some of these are unbundling of traditional degrees, immersive reality or immersive technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, micro-credentialing, hybrid learning, collaboration, inclusion, learning analytics, artificial intelligence, lifelong learning, etc., etc. Of course, quality education, flexibility, agility, etc. So these are the things that we read. These are the things that we hear. But how do we make sense of them so we can plan accordingly? If we really want, I rather like that ending of our colleague from MMSU saying that we can be a university of the future. In fact, all of us, as well as the other universities, can really plan towards this vision of being a university of the future. So how do we make sense of all these concepts, all these buzzwords, so we can plan accordingly and be a university of the future, the way we codify or articulate a university of the future? So these are the buzzwords. But wait, there's more, no? When we read publications, when we read literature, according to the World Economic Forum, and this is a relatively a recent publication early this year, there are 4 trends that will shape the future of higher education. And that number 1 is learning from everywhere. I was surprised or taken aback by this, because what we've been advocating for so many years, it's learning from anywhere or being ubiquitous, no? So, but this is something that is makes sense. It makes sense. Learning from everywhere. So instead of learning from anywhere, which provides flexibility, learning from everywhere, according to this article, provides opportunity for immersion such that lectures, classes, etc. can be combined with immersive practical experiences. And for the World Economic Forum, this is what hybrid learning means. Hybrid learning does not only mean, and this is something that we always provide as our definition of hybrid learning, combining a virtual and a physical classroom, but in this context of learning from everywhere, it allows the students to have a truly immersive and experiential learning. That means to say that while attending classes virtually, they are at a site or in a place where they can immediately apply the concepts that they are learning from the classroom and applying it into the real world. So, of course, there may be a very gray area about this anywhere and everywhere. But I think the bottom line here is for us to focus on not just providing concepts, abstract words, and concepts to our students, but immediately provide them with that opportunity to apply and have that immersive practical experiences so that they can apply the concepts that they are learning at the same time, not later, after classes or after the semester, after graduation, but at the same time that they are learning these concepts. Second trend, replacing lectures with active learning. I was really, the way this article was written, it was really hitting some truths, no? Sometimes it hurts, but these are the truths anyway. So yes, we know lectures are efficient way of teaching, but ineffective way of learning. So with digital information being ubiquitous and free, it seems ludicrous to pay thousands of dollars. So it was because the publication is a foreign publication. So the measurement of payment is in dollars. So it says payment thousands of dollars to listen to someone giving you information which you can find elsewhere at a much cheaper price, especially if the lecturer is just echoing what you can find in the internet. Okay, so that's why every time I am invited to speak in a conference, etc., I always think along this line. what can make my contribution, my lecture, my talk different? What is the added value that I am the one talking, instead of the participants just searching the internet about these things that I am talking about? So this is the same thing. If our teachers will just echo what is there in the internet, what our students can easily Google, so why do we have to pay? I mean, so much. So the thing is, we have to replace lectures with active learning. Probably lectures can be part of online or independent learning activities, which the students can do on their own. They can search, or they can Google, they can search the internet, we can record our lectures, but at the same time, provide some learning activities which will make the students active participants of the whole process. So it says here also, the science of learning shows that our brains do not learn by listening. And the little information we learn that way is easily forgotten. So instead, we have to have that opportunity to provide them with this kind of application. And this is something that is related to item number 1 in terms of the trend, the application of knowledge, so that they will really learn. So this is something that we also have to think when we plan. How should our classrooms, how should our university look like when we talk of the future of education? Third, we have to teach skills that remain relevant in a changing world. So according to a recent survey, and this is also in this the same article, 96% of chief academic officers at universities, tayo po yun, think that we are doing a good job preparing our young people for the workforce. No? Sabi nga namin sa UPOU, masyado tayong bilib sa sarili, ano? And we are thinking we are doing a good job. But the same survey says that less than half, or 41% of college students, and only 11% of business leaders share that view, that we are doing a good job preparing our people for the workforce. And this is probably the reason why we also open here that there is this gap between the skills, the knowledge that our graduates have compared to what the industries need. So there is that gap, probably because of this thing that we think we are doing a good job, but in reality, we are not. So in here, universities continue to focus on teaching specific skills. So let's do some reflections here, no? Involving the latest technologies, even though the skills and the technologies that support them are bound to become obsolete. So if we depend so much on technologies, the current, and we teach them the skills on how to use the technologies, few years from now, those technologies will be obsolete, and where shall we find our graduates? Probably not knowing how to use the other technologies that will result from modernization, development, etc. So as a result, universities are forever playing catch up with the skills needed in the future workplace. This is something that, remember, even before the pandemic, there were already discussions about how universities can catch up with the needs of the fourth industrial revolution. And then the pandemic happened. We haven't yet done that. I mean, in terms of catching up with what the fourth industrial revolution needs. And even at the time, there were already talks about the fifth industrial revolution. So where shall we find us, I mean, universities, in terms of really providing what our industries or the future workplace really needs? So what we need to teach are skills that remain relevant in new, changing, and unknown context. Earlier, there was a description of that we are living in a VUCA world. There are uncertainties. We don't know what the future workplace will be. No? So what do we need to teach are the skills, knowledge, in fact, knowledge and skills that would not depend on the changing technologies. And this is something that in the previous years, you would recall that there were these talks about college, or you don't need a college degree so that you can be employed. That's true. That's true. You don't really need, especially now that the industries are really more focused on the skills that you have. But what happened if there will be new technologies? So what I always advocate for is that the college degree would remain relevant, because what we are teaching our students are the knowledge and the skills that will make them adjust, that will make them learn, and that will make them really shape how these technologies would be, because they are at the center of all these things. So that's what we're teaching, the theorizing, putting together the practice and the theories that we already have now, and develop new set of skills and knowledge that would be very useful in shaping the future of the industry. So those are the things that we need to consider in terms of learning outcomes when we develop, or even when we review our curricular programs. And then number 4, using formative assessment instead of high-stake exams. If you will recall, during our shift to remote instruction, this became a problem. When our students are no longer coming to the school, so how are we going to take? How are we going to administer exams? Because our culture, our tradition is to rely on those high stake exams so that we can evaluate the learnings of our students. So this question is something that probably we can all answer. If you were to sit the final exam of the subject you majored in today, how would you fare? So like for instance, in my case, I am an agriculture graduate for my bachelor's degree, and I major in plant breeding, agronomy, plant breeding. Probably there's one course that I took in my undergrad, and that's plant breeding. That's 150 or something like that. It's at the 100 level course. And probably, yes, if I will sit in the final exam for the plant breeding in my major area, I don't think I will pass that. Course. So many exams do not measure our learning, but rather the information that we retained at that point in time. I just memorized the lectures of my teacher, so I was able to pass. And if I remember correctly, I was able to get a high grade because I was good at memorizing things. So instead of those high-stake exams, let us rethink assessment, and instead design formative assessment, which can be formal, informal evaluations, throughout the whole learning journey of our students. So right from the start of the semester, we already have these forms, this formal and informal evaluations, which are integrated into the way we design our courses. So instead of that one exam at the end of the semester, then we have this formative assessment to really measure the learning. And I think this is very important here, that because these formative assessments also improve the performance of our students. So that the aim is to improve, because the results of the formative assessment also provides our students with some form of information and feedback as to how they are faring when it comes to their performance in our courses. There are also 4 things, still according to the World Economic Forum, there are also 4 things that universities should do to stay relevant and provide that kind of education needed in the century ahead. So here, they are already talking of what are the things, what is the kind of education needed in the century ahead. If I remember correctly, when we started our discussion about the University of the Future, one of my colleagues asked, what exactly is our timeline for the future? When we talk of the future, is it a running timeline? Can we peg what that future is? So in this particular article, they peg the future as a century ahead. But in my case, I said at the time that probably we can peg the future to be 2050. That's the middle of the century. I was also asked, why 2050? And I said, probably because it's the middle of the century and it's easy to have that as your timeline when you plan on anything, especially for an academic institution such as ours. But then when I read the literature also, many international organizations also peg the future to be at 2050. So we're not alone in saying that 2050 can be something that a timeline that we can consider when we plan for the future of our respective universities. So these are the four things according to this article, which was also published early this year by the World Economic Forum. The first is embrace technology. And this is something that we experienced during the pandemic period, no? When we were doing our teaching and learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, we cannot go to the school. We're doing our teaching and learning remotely. So the digital transformation that happened during the past 2 years really enabled us to see and even experience many creative ways of harnessing the technology. So even at UPOU, before the pandemic, we were already using Zoom. Our very first experience of using Zoom, and that was few years before the pandemic, we were using Zoom for our meetings. And during the pandemic, we even improved on the way we've been using Zoom, probably because the features of the Zoom platform also improved during that time because of the so many users. If I remember correctly, we were using the free version that after 40 minutes, you would be cut off and you have to log in again so that you can have another 40 minutes in your session. But during the pandemic, we use technologies that enabled us to lecture synchronously, to interact asynchronously with our students. There are also new and promising technologies, that the immersive technology specifically, that can enable our students to be there while not being there, meaning to say that they can be immersive in their experience of learning through this technology. So we're talking here of virtual reality, augmented reality, all types of realities. So we can do that. So like, for instance, listen to live lectures, take field trips, relive the history, even as they say, experience what happened during the time of that era that we are studying, or our students are studying. And like for instance, for the medical students, this was really for those of you who are offering a medical or health sciences programs, this was really a challenge during the pandemic. And I can say probably for our John B. Lacson, our colleague from there, you already have many experiences on using these different technologies. I think they call it the simulator, all these things, so that your students can really experience being in the sea while not being in the sea. So something like that. And this is something that other universities can also take advantage of as something that can be part of our future. The second is optimize human interaction. Again, this was something that we experienced during the pandemic. We miss the human interaction. So therefore, and we know how precious this human interaction, in-person, face-to-face meetings really are, because we were deprived of that during the more than 2 years of the pandemic. So therefore, given that experience and realization, we have to optimize human interaction, meaning to say that when we plan for our in-person or face-to-face meetings, we have to design our learning activities so that we can optimize that meeting with our students. So what are the activities that we can do? Ask probing questions, find areas needing more clarity, have meaningful discussions and dialogue, hands-on experiences, and not just absorb information passively. You may ask, in a fully online university such as ours, such as the Open University, how can we simulate this human interaction, so to speak? We're not having in-person interaction unless unless this is something that is really required based on the learning outcomes, but something that we really don't want to encourage because almost 25% of our students are based outside the Philippines, and we don't want to marginalize them. So we can look at this human interaction as the synchronous online session, because that's the time that we are with our students. So instead of lecturing, because that can be done in some other occasions on the students' independent time, instead of lecturing during these synchronous sessions, we can have these different learning activities, probing questions, ask them to talk, make our students own that session by making them an active participant of the face-to-face session or of the synchronous sessions that we integrate into our course design. Personalized content, something that we've been hearing for so many years now. And there are much improvements on this because also of the kind of data, the different digital tools that we can use, so that we can have the different data which will tell us how our students are learning. The data can tell us their progress, what are the things that they find most challenging. And through this information data, we can personalize their learning such that they will stay on that lesson, content that they find challenging, and then other students can move on to other parts of the lesson. And fourth, we have to reach more people through technology. And this is the potential of doing this was something that we also saw during the pandemic, that we were able to reach our students wherever they are. And at the same time, provide inclusive, accessible, and relevant lifelong learning opportunities. And I think as a university, this is also part of our social responsibility to contribute to that goal of providing inclusive, accessible, quality, lifelong learning opportunities to the various learners, especially the Filipino learners. Okay, so those are the four things, no? Four, always. So there are also projections how higher education will be in the post-COVID-19 era. Okay, so in the aftermath of the pandemic, many universities will go online or will think of offering programs in the distance e-learning mode. So where shall we position ourselves? Before the pandemic, we can say that we have a specific place in the whole education ecosystem here in the Philippines, and we can even say that we can, because we are doing e-learning, we can even access or have students even if they are outside the Philippines. So many universities will go online and will think of offering programs in the distance e-learning mode, especially because of that experience. They will really plan for agility and flexibility. And this can be considered as a new business model for many universities. So they have the time, they have the resources, they have invested so much. Universities have invested so much. We also saw our colleagues making that transformation, being smart universities, smart campus, investing on infrastructure, and training the people who are involved in the instructional delivery. And the same thing is true for other universities, even private universities, if we can also say that. So they have the time, they have the resources to seize that opportunity for digital transformation and deliver programs in the distance e-learning mode. So there will be tough competition when it comes to offering programs. And the goal, because of that, our goal, each of us, the goal is to operate in the new digital or hybrid environment, keeping the highest academic standards. So we always have to think of quality. We always have to think of relevance. How relevant are our programs and how flexible is our system, so that the students will really opt to enroll in our university. This is something also that was observed and also projected. The student post-COVID-19 has educational options that did not exist prior to the pandemic. That is, I can opt to go in an in-person university or offering of a university, or there are already many universities now doing online programs. So if I don't want to go to the campus, then I will just go and enroll in online universities. So students will enroll also in schools with robust digital capabilities. And also at the same time, even if they are not on campus, if we can also provide them with career counseling services, especially providing them with roadmaps for future employment, that is also something that the students, our students, the current generation of the students would be looking for. So it says here, a survey in 48 countries conducted by the OECD revealed that students are interested in how their college or university can assist them with future employment opportunities. Again, this is a question for our self-reflection. Are we doing this? Something that we can also include in our planning for the future. We also consider the post-COVID era as the Great Reset. This is the chance for us, including us, open universities, distance education providers, to rethink how we fit into our respective communities and the role that we can play in shaping the future of the institutions in our community. So COVID-19, the Great Reset, how are we going to take advantage of that? Okay. There is also this framework that curricula and teaching should be interdisciplinary in approach to address problems without borders like global terror, pandemics, and climate change. Yun bang ating mga academic programs, yung bang ating mga curricula, and the way we are teaching our students provide for this interdisciplinary approach so that our students, the future manpower of industries, governance, etc., can address problems without borders. So these are the examples. We have experienced this so many times in so many cases. Are we enabling or capacitating our students to do this? Again, something that we can think about as we plan and as we review our curricular offerings and our teaching strategies. Okay, so how do we make sense of all this, the buzzword, the projections, so that we can plan and have a future for a framework for a reimagined education future. And when we talk of future, we are talking of soon, as in now. Okay, so this is a framework that I always have in mind, but only had the chance of putting it in an illustration like this. Okay, there are many initiatives that we are doing now at UPOU. So I put here the context of UPOU. I would like to start because this is what we have. What we have are traditional degree programs. All of us have that, and I think for me, probably the first step that will not take major efforts, of course, it will still take a lot of efforts, but probably not as big if we're going to attack the context, attack the planning from a different perspective. So the first is unbundling of traditional degree programs. As I've mentioned, we have traditional degree programs. The first thing is we can unbundle. When we review, taking note of the projections of what higher education will be in the future. So we review our degree programs, revise them for relevance, etc. But at the same time, think of unbundling these traditional degree programs. And this will lead to micro-credentialing. I think you have heard of this term also, and probably many of you are also planning to have this in your own respective institutions. So unbundling of traditional degree programs into shorter degree programs like certificates, diplomas that are laddered to the macro credentials like the degree programs. So when we unbundle the traditional degree programs, we are also unbundling the fees that our students would have to shell out if they will be enrolling in the degree program. So like for instance, we have associate programs, certificates, etc. So at UPOU, this is something that that we have done in the past. We have associate programs these are 2-year programs that are laddered to the formal degree programs or the 4-year degree programs. But at the end of the 2-year and getting their associate certificates, they can already have additional credentials that will make them that can get them employment. So in a way, we are addressing that unemployment issue that happened during the time of the pandemic. So shorter degree programs, but at the same time, giving them the opportunity to still pursue the degree, bachelor's degree, because we put value to these traditional degree programs. That is something that we hold very dear in our culture as Filipinos. And then from shorter degree programs, associates, diplomas, etc., we can further unbundle them. Still unbundle the shorter degree program so that we can have micro courses. Micro courses, probably equivalent of 1 unit. And this is what something that will somehow align with what we've been hearing as micro credentialing. And when we are into the micro credentialing already, we have to think of how we can partner with the industry so that the skills and knowledge that our students will get from these micro courses will be vetted by the industry, and they with these skills they can already be employed by the major industries in our country. So relevant skills, and at the same time we design it for active learning, which was I discussed earlier. We've been doing this, offering our courses online or with online component if we are not yet accredited to really offer our programs fully online. So by offering online these micro courses or having online components for these courses, we are already providing flexibility and agility to our education ecosystem. And it will give us the opportunity to embrace technology. Okay? We can embrace technology when we already have the online component. So we have the opportunity to apply the different digital tools and platforms like artificial intelligence, learning analytics, which can enable us to personalize learning, support our students, facilitate access and inclusion, such that we can already integrate the basic features of the universal design for learning into these micro courses. And of course, through the use of the digital tools, we can already provide relevant support to our students. These micro courses should be designed such that the credits can be stackable and can be used towards macro credential or the degree programs. At the same time, to facilitate access, we can think of offer these micro courses as massive open online courses. So like in the case of UP Open University, we already have policies for our massive open online courses. How are we going to compensate the course developers, the course coordinators, etc.? Or we can offer them as paid credit courses. Remember that these are should be certified. And there will always be cost attached to certifying the units earned through these micro courses. We always have to think that when we design courses for micro credentialing, it should be anchored to the Philippine Qualifications Framework or the PQF or the National Qualifications Framework if you are not from the Philippines. But at the same time, we have to think of how we can provide quality education, and that is thinking of the relevant quality assurance framework for online teaching and learning, which we can apply or which we can use, which can guide us when we develop the online component or the online micro courses or the online degree programs that we will offer to our students. When we think of access, of course, there are many things that we can look into. There's still the RA 10931 for our degree programs, undergraduate degree programs for the SUCs. And I have mentioned the MOOCs as another opportunity so that we can offer inclusive and accessible micro courses for our various types of learners. But at the end of the day, if we really want to think of stackable credits from these micro courses, we always have to anchor all these courses and the competencies that we will design or that we will set for these courses to the qualifications framework. So which level are we aiming at is something that will go back to the design of these courses. So this is a framework. This is a framework that I hope we can implement at UPOU to be part of how we will move forward in this post-pandemic era. So that's it. I have mentioned that since 2019, many of you were there when we started our discussion of the University of the Future. That was the NCODEL in Baguio City. We had our roundtable discussion, which led to the formation of CODEP. But at the same time, that year was also significant in the sense that we actively pursued this articulation of what the University of the Future in the context of UPOU should be. And we are hoping that this is an opportunity for us to concretize this articulation. So I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and thank you for listening. Thank you.